Simply put, the Purgatorius was destined to change the world from the very beginning. This creature, Purgatorius, lived approximately 66 million years ago, at the tail end of the dinosaur era and the dawn of the Cenozoic. Outwardly, Purgatorius bore little resemblance to what we recognize as monkeys today. Instead, it looked more like modern-day tree shrews, seemingly indistinguishable from the other scattered mice of the Mesozoic era. However, after the asteroid strike turned dinosaurs to dust, most mammals emerged from their tree canopies and burrows to claim the ecological niches left vacant by the dinosaurs. Yet, the descendants of Purgatorius remained steadfastly arboreal for a remarkable 40 million years. They would only venture out at night to feed on plants or insects. Purgatorius and its relatives were singularly focused on one thing, continually perfecting every skill necessary for arboreal life and actively exploring every possible way of living in the trees. For example, one lineage even evolved skin flaps, marking yet another instance of mammalian gliding between tree branches, ultimately evolving into today's colugo, flying lemurs. Well, they simply made the same mistake all mammals do, but even setting aside these misguided Purgatorius and their kin, they didn't display much ambition. All their evolution seemed geared towards nothing more than catching a few more insects among the branches. To locate tiny seeds and insects within the intricate canopy, their eyes shifted to the front of their faces. This resulted in a highly overlapping field of vision, providing powerful stereoscopic vision. On their hands and feet, they developed opposable thumbs, while simultaneously losing the almost standard mammalian palm pads. In their place, they formed pads at the tips of their fingers and toes, and their claws transformed into nails. All these features combined to create an incredibly sensitive fingertip, coupled with limbs whose flexibility was nothing short of miraculous. This enabled them to become the most agile animals in the tree canopy. And with that, the true primates were born. This seemingly innocent and harmless evolution seemed to charm Earth. Primates quickly became the favored model of creation. What harm could primates possibly cause? For over 10 million years after the extinction of the dinosaurs, global temperatures continuously climbed. Fragmented forest islands gradually reconnected. Adding to this, North America and Europe were very close at the time. Being so deeply intertwined with forests, primates rapidly spread from the Americas into Europe, and then further diffused into North Africa and East Asia, becoming a truly international species. Not only that, Earth even presented them with an official gift package, fruit. It's hard to say whether primates discovered fruit or if trees prepared fruit specifically for primates. For primates, fruit nourished their increasingly larger bodies. For plants, when primates ate the fruit, they would also swallow the seeds contained within. These seeds would then be dispersed to distant places through primate feces, growing into new forests. It was food that filled their bellies and also helped spread the trees, a perfect symbiosis. And that's not all. Approximately 55.5 million years ago, Earth's temperature rose by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius within 10,000 years. Yes, this was the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, PETM. This event instantly caused forests to spread all the way to the Arctic. Primates naturally leveraged this opportunity, becoming one of the most flourishing groups in the Northern Hemisphere. This also brought them out of the shadows of night and into the sunlight. Around that time, a new type of primate emerged in Jingzhou, Hubei, known as Archicebus achilles. Their eyes developed trichromatic, three-color, vision, with a particularly strong sensitivity to red. This allowed them to instantly spot ripe red fruits amidst a sea of green. From then on, red on green became the standard aesthetic for primates. With the bright daylight and enhanced vision, a powerful sense of smell became less critical. Consequently, they abandoned the standard mammalian wet nose, greatly simplifying their nasal passages. Their descendants are thus known as haplorhini, dry-nosed primates, and it was this lineage that gradually transformed into the round-faced monkeys we recognize today. In contrast, another group of primates retained their original nasal structure and are known as strepsirrhini, wet-nosed primates. Their descendants evolved into today's lemurs and lorises, among others. By the Eocene, over 40 million years ago, early haplorhini, represented by Eosimias, a genus of early haplorhine primates, and early strepsirini, represented by Omamyidae, a diverse family of early primates, often considered strepsirin-like, had respectively claimed the day and night, becoming the most prosperous ean and young primates of that rainforest world. However, this prosperity gradually attracted various predators. Snakes, birds of prey, and early carnivorans all set their sights on these fat targets. While primates had developed a host of black technologies, they notably lacked defensive adaptations. In haste, some primates scurried into tree hollows, others evolved foul body odors, and some even developed the bizarre ability to release venom from their armpits. Although their size was still not much larger than that of a mouse, they evolved more developed canines that could both defend against external enemies and be used for internal group conflicts. More crucially, they specifically developed a portion of their cerebral cortex dedicated to discerning the behavior of their own kind. This led to the evolution of a new type of neuron, mirror neurons. These signified the rise of a primate lineage with continuously strengthening intelligence, the Anthropoidea, or higher primates. These are essentially what we now generally consider apes and monkeys. So, for simplicity, let's call them ape monkeys. Leveraging superior group cooperation, these early ape monkeys roamed extensively within the Eocene rainforests, rapidly spreading into what were then Europe and Africa. Because they were small and lived in the tree canopy, flash floods could easily sweep both trees and monkeys into the ocean. Thus, in southern Africa, a group of ape monkeys was inadvertently set adrift on a great voyage. Fortunately, at that time, there was a series of island chains between the southern tip of Africa and South America. These small monkeys continuously settled on one island after another and then drifted again. Perhaps only exceptionally small individuals could survive the long sea journey, so eventually, only tiny ones managed to cross the island chain and reach South America. But in the predator-ridden South America, this was still enough to thrive. Consequently, the descendants of these immigrants in South America, known as New World monkeys, are generally quite small. For example, the pygmy marmoset, the second smallest living primate, weighs only over 100 grams. However, the ape monkeys that remained in Afro-Eurasia, the Old World monkeys, were not so fortunate. On one hand, as various predators fully emerged, the trees became increasingly unsafe. On the other hand, a new generation of small arboreal animals, such as squirrels, continuously eroded the traditional strongholds of primates. Even more troubling, after Earth's temperature reached its Cenozoic peak around 50 million years ago, it began an irreversible and continuous decline. Over the next 10 million years, cold and dryness started to spread across the Earth. Forests gradually receded, and ice sheets reappeared within the Arctic Circle. To combat the increasingly perilous environment, they had to further enlarge their groups and, correspondingly, increase their brain capacity. With the aid of mirror neurons, cunning and strategy, rather than mere brute force, began to dictate the struggle for resources within the group. This, of course, also included mating rights. Consequently, they effectively self-selected for smarter individuals, generation after generation. Earth seemed to express pity. Oh dear, this is too tragic. I must give them something more. But then, a thought, wait, you said they were rapidly boosting their intelligence? That's not right. Swiftly. Around 33 million years ago, Earth's greenhouse climate abruptly ended. Forests contracted across the board, an event known as the Eocene-Oligocene extinction event. Primates, being extremely dependent on forests, naturally faced immense challenges, suffering the most devastating blow since their emergence. In North America, the birthplace of primates, native primate species were immediately wiped out. East Asia, as the origin point for haplorhini and Anthropoidea, was also a major target. The Indian subcontinent rapidly pushed northward, causing mountains to rise and block the oceanic winds from the Indian Ocean. East Asian forests completely collapsed. The local Anthropoidea were entirely annihilated. And only a few haplorhini survived. Their last remaining populations were forced to retreat into the jungles of Southeast Asia, once again clinging to nocturnal existence. Because their sense of smell had already atrophied, these primates had no choice but to compensate by massively enlarging their eyes to enhance night vision, evolving into today's tarsiers. Conversely, the Strepsirini, wet-nosed primates, which had retained more primitive features, inexplicably surged and became the most common primates in East Asia 30 million years ago. This event, which set East Asian primates back to an earlier stage, is known as the Mongolian reconstruction. However, one continent was overlooked: Africa, the Cenozoic's retirement home. It was here that a completely new kind of anthropoid emerged. They used a simple, brutal strategy to simultaneously solve the three major challenges of cold, competitors, and predators, incidentally also resolving the local dilemma of their wet-nosed primate counterparts. This strategy was to get bigger. Egyptopithecus, living over 30 million years ago, already weighed over 6 kilograms. It possessed most of the characteristics we associate with monkeys today. After a brief period of consolidation, their descendants repopulate the Eurasian continent, completely decimating older primate lineages like the Omomyidae and Eosimias, seeing that this wave of changes had not only failed to crush primates but seemed to have made them stronger. Earth shifted its strategy from aggressive assault to slow erosion. Approximately 25 million years ago, Earth's climate suddenly warmed across the board. The polar ice caps disappeared again, and forests once more spread across most parts of the world. The descendants of Egyptopithecus simply followed this trend and flourished. Some of these ape monkeys essentially maintained Egyptopithecus's versatile all-purpose configuration, adapting flexibly to various ecological niches. These evolved into macaques, golden snub-nosed monkeys, baboons, and other monkeys, gradually becoming the most diverse primate group today. Others, however, began to relentlessly pursue the evolutionary path of increasing body size. These were the hominoids, or apes. We'll tentatively call them protoapes for now. Living approximately 18 to 14 million years ago, the proconsul protoapes had already reached a maximum weight of about 40 kilograms. As their bodies grew larger, their small, muscular tails became increasingly ineffective. So, they simply lost their tails and instead strengthened their limbs. Today's gibbons largely retain the early protoape lifestyle, using their long, strong arms to swing through the trees. However, some protoapes also learned to use their strong legs to stand upright in the trees, developing bipedal locomotion. This allowed them to reach fruits on higher branches without having to climb to the very top. With their increased size and more complex social groups, various protoapes became unrivaled in the dense forests of Africa. A new primate empire seemed to be flourishing. However, beneath Earth's seemingly stable surface, another major shift was orchestrated. The Afro-Eurasian continents were forming, and both ocean currents and monsoon patterns were quietly changing. Around 17 million years ago, when the climate warmed again, it didn't bring the usual moist sea breezes. Instead, a heat wave swept in, causing a great drought to spread across the African continent. In a very short time, most of Africa's rainforests transformed into the savannas and grasslands we know today. This sudden and drastic change caught primates completely off guard. Large numbers of protoapes became refugees, wandering far and wide. Some, like Civipithecus, returned to East Asia. Their descendants evolved into today's orangutans and the largest primate in history, Gigantopithecus, but most protoapes made different choices. For instance, Dryopithecus, around 10 million years ago, were likely a group of such protoapes that split into several waves. One wave decided to remain in Africa. This lineage probably later evolved into today's gorillas. However, the majority decided to migrate northward to the cooler, wetter Europe. Gradually, Europe became a new refuge for many protoapes. But all of this had been clearly orchestrated by Earth. It was waiting for this moment. Around 9.6 million years ago, the climate suddenly turned dramatically colder. The fierce northern winds utterly devastated Europe, wiping out nearly all its lush broadleaf forests. In just over 3 million years, all the proto-apes in Europe went extinct. But incredibly, a tiny handful of individuals, true escapees, desperately fled back to Africa. This included Auranopithecus and its descendants. From their long evolutionary journey, they learned one thing: the more one tries to adapt to the environment, the more one realizes the limits of an animal's capabilities. Unless one transcends being an animal, what are you trying to say, you ask? I want to become human.